Deathpixie disclaimer. This video was originally recorded in September 2024. There is swearing and profanity. Sources are listed in the description. This video is not monetized. Any ads you see provide revenue to the hosting site, not the creators. If you made it this far, geez, you have a lot of patience.
Deathpixie dancing on the lip of madness!
Welcome to Shitty PowerPoint Theater. Dignity not included.
All right, now we're on to your favorite prime minister, and I mean that sarcastically.
No. It's your favorite prime minister.
Oh, it's the robot.
Mary came on the air and was like, "Oh, I can't wait. We get to talk about Stephen Harper, the most likable prime minister in the history of the world." And then, producer Rob, had to come in with this quote. Like he really did. In order to save Miri and Deathpixie's image, we would like to state as a platform, Deathpixie does not endorse the view of Miri Witch, who loves Stephen Harper. But producer Rob came in with this quote: "Like Darth Vader, but with no likable qualities, and may kill kittens." Look at that face.
Yeah. Also,
just look at it. Just admire it for how manufactured and forced it feels.
He is, and you will see this when we talk about it. He literally is the result of a conservative think tank. Also, yes, his animation was a loaf of sliced bread, because that's how white he is.
That is honestly the most color he's got, though.
So, you can tell he lasted a while, and you're probably gonna be
he lasted a lot. We're not going to take anything away from the Harper era. Like, it was long, and to religious conservatives, this was probably a huge step in the right direction for Canada. We are not a member of the religious conservatives. We do not view it as such. And if you look at the Liberal Party, again, it's historically very, very weak. And if you go back to part 1 or part whatever of this series, you'll know that the election cycle in Canada, as open as it can be and as multi-party as it may be, turns into this. Elect Liberal, get pissed at Liberal. Elect Conservative, get pissed at Conservative. Elect Liberal, get pissed at Liberal. Elect Conservative, get pissed at Conservative. During the time of Stephen Harper's reign as Prime Minister, we fielded Stéphane Dion. The Liberal Party fielded Stéphane Dion. Stéphane Dion, as great as he could have been, was like Paul Barton in the fact that he couldn't talk.
And we don't mean physically couldn't. It was in terms of being able to be concise.
Being able to be eloquent, concise, and charismatic.
Yeah.
He could not talk to save his life.
Now, I will say this. I don't consider Stephen Harper to be charismatic, but his voter base does.
He can, objectively, he can talk better than Stéphane Dion.
He's
objectively,
he can be concise.
Yes.
He can be a prime example. How many times have I gone and
He can be concise.
He won't do that. He could be concise.
He can be concise. He could be eloquent.
Yeah.
And for those levels of charisma, yes, he is much better than what the Liberals were fielding at the time. Jack Layton, I would argue, for the NDP, was much better at those things than Stephen Harper. He was.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, the NDP carries a lot of negative connotation with an older voter base at being too extreme left-wing.
Which is hilarious, because they're not.
They really aren't. But if you talk to anyone as to why they, well, even in the 2015 election, where it was not Jack Layton, rest his soul, it was Thomas Mulcair. Why aren't you supporting the NDP? They are. You talk to anybody, and they are too left wing. If you look at their policy platform at that election, though, they were a lot more centralist than the Trudeau Liberal government was.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me because the platforms are all published. You can find concise ones written by the parties themselves that you can read in under 10 minutes.
Yep.
Which means if you read very slowly, you can do that in 20 minutes.
Yep.
Guess what? That's on your phone in the bathroom when you're avoiding work. Like, you can do that.
Do you want to learn about the Green Party? Learn about it on a toilet. That's what I did in the 2019 election, and or the 2021 election or something. I'm not complaining.
But I will say the Green Party after Elizabeth May, the speed run downhill is impressive.
Yeah, that's, if you want us to talk about that, we can talk about that too. But it's interesting to me. Stephen Harper was risen, and regardless of what you might think about Stephen Harper, it is by definition an era.
Yeah,
it is. But it's an era where the political left was so weak, despite the efforts of Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. So weak that
and
virtually
fractured.
No power, and fractured because of Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin, that no force could rise to come against the Conservative Party at the time. Great move, by the way, by the Conservative Party to embrace religion. Not great in terms of policy, but great moves in terms of whether or not they win or lose. Because a lot of the embrace that they did of the religious right was in relation to the rise of George W. Bush and how that happened within the United States in the 2000s. Yeah. So they saw what happened there. It worked. They somehow fielded somebody who was more eloquent than George W. Bush and was so religiously extreme that I don't know, objectively looking back on it, hindsight bias, how you were able to do it, but I have to give credit where credit is due. Yeah. That is fantastic.
So we'll point out he is still living. Wife Lorraine Teskey still alive. They had 2 kids. So conservative. So up until this point, when we've been saying conservative, we were meaning progressive conservative.
Yes.
This is when the Conservative Party came into force, and they are in fact amalgamation of the Progressive Conservatives and the Canadian Alliance, which was previously the Reform Party. This is your extreme right, evangelical Christian type viewership. So clever in terms of surviving and having a consistent voter base. Absolutely horrendous in terms of, not being against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, because they absolutely are.
That's kind of bad.
I'm also very impressed that they the religious aspect today has become so high. You see recent immigrants or first generation Canadians voting for this party when this party very clearly wants to keep people like them out, because to them the religious aspect is so much higher. So you have a lot of people voting against their own self-interest, which is a fascinating bit of hypocrisy.
It is admirable. Yeah. It is so fascinating that it is admirable.
Now, one thing I want to note is this time period, this is where we have the tracker for how many campaign promises were kept.
Yeah, so this is the start of that, so we will reference that a lot.
Yeah, so there's the completed one for Stephen Harper, there is the ongoing one for Justintrudeau, emphasis on ongoing. Also, another thing is, he became Western Canada's messiah, which is hilarious.
He really did.
Which is hilarious because he is a kid from fucking Leaside in Toronto.
Sure is.
So do with that what you will. Amazing.
Hey, they needed their guy. They needed their guy.
So pro cons list.
Oh boy.
Now we'll go through the pros and then we'll talk about the cons. I can tell you already want to talk about one of the cons I put on here.
Oh god.
So Sandra Lovelace, unfortunate last name, but Sandra Lovelace, if you know why it's unfortunate, you know why. First Indigenous woman appointed to Senate. There was a formal apology for the residential school system. Invested over $5 billion towards public transit projects in Canada. However, massive issues with Bombardier.
Yeah.
I do believe the first people they screwed over was the Toronto Transit Commission, TTC, with subways that were too wide for the tracks.
Yeah, so basically, yes, they invested $5 billion towards public projects in Canada. Basically, however, what they did was they sent it off to the lowest bidder. They awarded contracts based to the lowest bidder. Now, Bombardier, big company, can manufacture a lot of things on the cheap. However, when they do that, it also leads to many issues with regards to any sort of public transit, war restoration efforts, what have you, to the point where either a lot of items need to be redone. That's why you see a lot of delays in projects such as, say, Eglinton Crosstown GRT projects, fraught with delays, fraught with budgetary issues because of the contract issue between Metrolinx and Bombardier. We're not going to get into that here, but it is a huge thing to award your contracts to the lowest bidder, but it is fantastic that $5 billion was put into public transit programs.
The public transit tax credit, which was useful for people. There was a loan guarantee towards the Lower Churchill project in Labrador. So that was for 2 hydroelectric stations. I think we can all agree having power is a good thing.
Yep.
Completed the 1998 Liberals started IFTA. Is that how you'd say that acronym? IFTA?
Actually, I would just say it as EFTA, but it would
EFTA.
be IFTA.
He was the first prime minister to visit the front lines.
And that was huge.
Yeah, it is a big thing. He
objectively huge.
Yeah. There was the Veterans Bill of Rights, the new Veterans Charter, and Veterans Affairs. So the flip side of that, though, is there was an increase in funding. However, he closed 9 offices and phased out 900 jobs and claimed it was due to moving online and moving services to Canada, to Service Canada. So take that or leave it. The lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7 economies. However, that was mostly to do with Paul Martin's work as finance minister in the Chrétien era. So just so you understand how what he did reverberated after his time as finance minister. I will note the formal apology that he did give. What was it? They did not apologize for pre-Confederation actions because it was viewed that the government of Canada can only apologize for what the government of Canada did. They can't apologize for what was done not under the government of Canada. Yeah. So I feel that's a splitting hairs thing. To other people, it's not a splitting hairs thing. It depends on how you view legal terminology at that point. There was the Anti-Terrorism Act in 2015. You can feel how you want to on that, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is what meant that, for example, incels are considered a terrorist group in Canada. And it's in part because of this. It's in part because of the van attack in Toronto that happened. And there have been a few other gun issues that happened. There's also the history of those issues with Polytech. The Polytech massacre in Montreal in the 80s. There was a Quebecois Nation motion, which was basically a symbolic letter, and the Federal Accountability Act, which would have been awesome if he followed it. Now, I
Yeah.
will say Justintrudeau has been trying to follow it to the best of his ability, but Harper did not follow it. Now that we've done that, let's go into the cons. Big con for a lot of people is he's a fan of Nickelback. Big pro for a lot of people is that he's a fan of Nickelback, but globally speaking, that's a big con. And I wanted some levity before we get into issues. So there is the In-N-Out scandal. It started in 2006 and it ended with a plea deal in 2012. He withdrew Canada from the Kyoto Protocol. There was the Canada Senate expenses scandal, and the robocall scandal is what that was supposed to be. Now, robocall, what's interesting is when I was younger, I thought that it was just campaigning before campaigning period. I didn't realize that what it actually was they were suppressing votes by directing voters to bogus polling stations. That is just unconscionable on so many levels and so evil to do, especially to very vulnerable people, which I think you can speak to as to how unconscionable that is to do to people.
So it's one of those things that when you take a look at our senior population and you are effectively attacking them, saying, good evening, Amazon charges, for example, have been levied against you, connect to this number. Chances are you don't know what Amazon is. You don't know what these charges are. You want to try to get it done. Tens of thousands of dollars can be scammed away from you simply for doing your due diligence. Further to that, if somebody calls and claims to be your son, your grandson, your daughter, your granddaughter, you're going to be hailed to help as a senior citizen, as you should, as a citizen of the world, without thinking that there could be people with absolutely zero ethics out there who could attempt to impersonate these people. Now, I'm going to be perfectly frank with you. At some point, I worked with a mortgage refinance company, and a lot of what we would do would be cold calls. And a lot of the issues that you would face are in rebuttals to this robocall scandal. Needless to say, what people need to know about those industries where people will call and try to sell you something. Number one, they will call if you submit information online. If they have any sort of ethical swing about them. And number two, they will call you within certain guidelines as outlined by the Canadian Radio and Telecommunications Commission. It's not a robot. It cannot be a robot. It has to be a real person contacting you in order for that to be of any sort of credence. Please report the quote-unquote scams out there. Absolutely. Because it makes certain people's jobs who are trying to offer you a service a lot harder. And just as an ethical piece, it is not something that should be done to any Canadian citizen, period. It's terrible. I want you guys to think about your elderly parents or grandparents or great-grandparents watching this. Would you want to see any of them get taken for a loop and scammed for a bunch of money and left potentially destitute? No, you wouldn't. So don't bloody do it.
Yep. So, the G20 use of force scandal in Toronto. So, what was originally supposed to happen, and I am summarizing, was the exhibition center, which is in Toronto, and it can actually be self-contained. That was where it was supposed to happen. All the plans by the RCMP was for it to happen there. And then a few weeks before, Harper changed his mind and wanted it to take place in downtown Toronto, which meant they didn't have enough resources. The local police were not prepared for it. Remember, OPP is not a thing in Ontario or Quebec, really, outside of provincial highway management. So all of a sudden, they're put in this position where we have to bring in other officers fast with barely any training. And that meant kettling was being used. A bunch of people were rounded up and put into jails. There were reports from the people who were not even jails, just detention places, detention centers, makeshift ones. There were reports from people saying that they had officers apologizing to them, saying, we don't know what's going on. This shouldn't be happening. We are so sorry this is happening. Meanwhile, other officers are taking off like their name tags and things like that. I've never seen a drill down result of, complaints made against officers, whether or not those officers were part of the RCMP, a different police force from outside of Ontario, or the Toronto Police, or even a police force outside of Toronto. But it was quite a moment in terms of sparking a lot of reform in policing, but also you have to understand, Harper did not like the GTA at the time. The GTA was staunchly liberal, and this really felt like punishment to the center of the GTA, to the center of Southern Ontario. So there's a lot more details on this, but it very much was a direct result from Harper deciding to change the location. And I find that his responsibility in that situation is often glossed over.
Yep.
But it was prepared to happen at the exhibition center in a controlled environment. And then the plan changed. So, take what you want from that. I'm going to mention it a second time. Canada Senate expenses scandal.
Yeah.
Expensing things left, right, and center. So, yes, we have Federal Accountability Act, but the expenses scandal kept going on. There was a 2008 to 2009 Canadian parliamentary dispute handled by asking Governor General Michel Jean to prorogue Parliament. And then that resulted in the 2010 Canada anti-prorogation protest. He did this a lot. It was to avoid a non-confidence vote by Liberal Bloc Québécois and NDP coalition, and to buy time before an election. It also allowed him to avoid dealing with the Afghan detainee issue, which we now directly knew Guantanamo and what was going on there. There was a no confidence vote after being found in contempt of Parliament. Contempt of Parliament. That's a big deal here. Selling military equipment to Saudi Arabia. There was Operation Impact, which was in opposition to ISIL bombings. However, there was no plan to go in and help the victims of the attacks, and those victims were not ISIS, by the way. So there was no plan to actually come in and help the people, which you need to have. He didn't maintain Canadian neutrality. So he had made many comments supporting Israel on the Israel-Lebanon conflict. He would not allow reporters to ask him questions on his position. He was criticized about his description of Israel's response. Canada also lost a seat in the bid for UN Security Council. And Harper later said it was due to his pro-Israeli stance. Pro-Israeli stance? Gee, that sounds a little topical now, doesn't it?
Just a bit. To give the guy a bit of a break. This kind of stuff has happened before. Mm-hmm. Never to this extreme a level, and never to something that does not directly involve Canada in some way, shape, and form, or is based upon extremely close proximity, past and present. This is not a case of Jean Chrétien saying that he does not support the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
To the right way. This is for that one you could argue he's acting in the best interest of Canada with his comments. in the case of Harper being pro-Israel, no, the only people that you are serving with that, it's not the country of Canada, it's the religious right backing that you are supporting. And it was an issue in which Harper could have said nothing and come out a lot cleaner for it, regardless of his personal beliefs or the beliefs of his party.
Yeah.
This is very bad on an international level for Canada. Or very good, depending on who you are.
Yeah.
However, the comments of one man in this case don't really echo where the nation was at the time, at least in our opinion.
Yeah. And there's a lot of controversy around what's going on right now between Israel and Palestine. I think the big thing is, to me personally, there are no winners in war.
No.
There are none, and that's what we are sitting front row seat for right now. He never put through Senate reforms that were promised. However, this was probably a good thing because he is quite yikes on human rights, which we'll get to in some of the quotes.
Yeah.
He eliminated the long-form census, which meant that we weren't getting adequate data to make determinations about funding for different programs, especially social assistance-based programs, as well as the long gun registry, which seems weird to me because I'm like, it's there. It's there. Why? But whatever. He fell short of the UN Millennium Development Goals. So that was about $700 million. And he actually cut 8 different African countries from the list of priority aid recipients.
Yeah.
There was... though this is... I'm going to skip over to the Phoenix pay system. The reason why I mention that is, if you can't keep your house clean, how can I trust you to keep other things clean? So it was putting federal government employees through a Phoenix pay system. It was disastrous. There were weeks of no pay, weeks of not having proper pay, months of discrepancies. It was ridiculous. And I'm just like, you had a perfectly okay pay system before, and then you put in something substantially worse, and you didn't do it shows that you didn't do change management properly. You didn't do training properly. You didn't test the software properly ahead of time. All of these things that I don't know, these skills that translate to policy, acts, changes in, changes in directives, changes in all of those skills that translate into these bigger issues were not performed there. So just a thing. And then a big one was the closing of the labs, closing of libraries, drastic cuts to scientific research and data collection. There were scientists who would show up, and there would be federal employees coming in, taking all of their research and kicking them out.
Yep.
Over 2,000 scientists were dismissed, and funding was cut from world-renowned research facilities. Many essential programs had cut so deep they had to shut down entirely. These were programs that monitor smokestack emissions, food inspectors, oil spills, water quality, and climate change. There were gag orders on scientists. There were a bunch of government libraries that were closed without consultation. It was just ridiculous. And there was so much disarray, inaccessibility for research. I have no idea how much information was lost. There was a CBC Fifth Estate documentary where they spoke to a researcher who found a Viking site in Nunavut. That's like, wait, what? In Nunavut of all, they got that far? Like, what? That changes so much. Completely shut down. So it's, and then also on top of it, there wasn't a lot of money saving.
No.
So it begs the question of where were these savings going to? A couple things that I'll mention that are neither here nor there. 2006, the Clean Air Act and the Clean Air Regulatory Agenda, it never became law. The economic action plan was passed in response to the financial crisis of 2007, 2008. I think we're just now beginning to see if that was helpful or not.
Yep.
Interesting fact. So there was a poll done by Angus Reid that found that 53% of respondents were opposed to prorogation, while 19% supported it, and 38% believed Harper used prorogation to curtail the Afghan detainee inquiry. So it was interesting. And then lastly, and this is quite key, the 2008 election was the lowest voter turnout in Canada. And we said before, but this is what happens, is when you have galvanized a bunch of voters together under one party, they will go and vote no matter what.
Yep.
When everybody's split up and you introduce voter apathy and the feeling that nothing's going to change, they don't show up. But guess what? A government still gets voted in and decisions are going to be made. And by you not showing up and at least invalidating or doing a protest vote, you're allowing it to happen. You need to be quantitatively recorded. And that is the bare minimum. That is the absolute bare minimum. So.
Yeah. So basically, it goes back to right in Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, exactly. That's that. We could have had a Bugs Bunny write-in in 2008, but no. Anyway, are you cool with me moving on?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So this picture was requested by producer Rob because it is Stephen Harper with a cat looking like he may or may not kill the cat. This is probably the closest we got to a meme of Harper as the memes started to become a thing.
Look at where his hand is.
I'll tell you, this was the highest
I don't even
quality
like
image
cats. They
find.
steal my fish, but God, somebody saved that poor little thing.
It's kind of got a you vibe, that kitten.
Oh God, it does.
I think that's why you sympathize with it.
Like when you bring me out, and I see the light, and I'm like, oh God, I'm free, and then I'm like, no, you're just in the coven. You're out here for another video, and the look in that kitten's eyes is like, send help.
So, a quote from him: "There is no greater fraud than a promise not kept."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why he's got 100% promise record. But no, that was a big thing for traditional conservatism, that quote.
Yes, and it's a nice thing people can get themselves behind without actually holding yourself to a standard.
Oh.
But it was a big thing. So that tracker, he, as of July 19th, fulfilled 85, as of July 2019, fulfilled 85% of pledges. That includes partially completed pledges as well. So I want to note that. I will say, though, just because you kept your pledges doesn't necessarily mean those pledges were a good thing, such as, shutting down the agencies that test our drinking water. Just saying.
Yeah.
Big thing people need to remember. He is a member of Rock Point Church, and then he was a member of Eastgate Alliance Church. So that says a lot about his beliefs. And unlike, other prime ministers which tried to keep things like that separate, he may have not spoken about it, but it was definitely not separate.
He was very public about
big
it.
thing.
He may not have spoken about it, but
big thing. He is the first prime minister to employ a personal stylist. So Michelle Muten. So I want you to recognize average wear for him. This is with a stylist.
Yeah. In what world?
So I just want to say, imagine him without a stylist. The haircut, that's a stylist. Imagine him without a stylist. So
I have a feeling like he vetoed a lot of the stylist's ideas.
I would
Like-
love there to be an in-depth interview with the stylist. I would
Yeah.
love that. And we can just talk about the stylist duties and stuff. We don't have to talk about anything else.
Does he give off Gollum Lord of the Rings vibes to you? Like I'm looking at him with that sneer. I haven't brought this up to you before because like you didn't let me see the pictures or the light outside of my dark dungeon, but looking at this, all I can think of is process. So, but yeah no.
Yeah, he and his wife, I mentioned it before, they foster kittens and cats. But once again, I have a quote from him that makes me seriously question how he feels about cats. So here's the thing. He was trained as an economist. He's the first prime minister with an economics degree since Pierre Trudeau and the first prime minister without a law degree since Joe Clark. Take that to mean what you will. Long-standing opponent of centralized federalism, which, again, that should tell you a lot about his views and stuff like that. When he became prime minister, journalist Graham Fraser said that Harper's speech was, and I quote, one of the most monarchist speeches a Canadian prime minister has given since John Diefenbaker, which should say a lot.
Yeah, you're bringing the Deef into this. Yeah.
The 2011 election, that election ended 5 years of minority governments and made the New Democratic Party the official NDP, the official opposition for the first time. The Liberals were relegated to third place for the first time. Elizabeth May was brought in as Canada's first Green Party member of Parliament, and the Bloc Québécois was reduced from 47 seats to 4. It was a watershed moment, but I need you to understand that the voter turnout for this only represented 22% of eligible voters. 22%. That is the lowest level of support from any winning party in Canadian history.
Sure was.
Those churches I mentioned, they are all evangelical churches, if I didn't mention it before. And so I do want to point out, before I get into the quotes, he has quotes about not running a deficit and about how the Liberals want to rogue the House. And then what did he do?
He ran a deficit.
And he prorogued the House an insane number of times. So there's this hypocritical thing where we've got awesome sound bites, but he's not doing what he's saying. He's not walking his talk. He also would continually accuse Atlantic Canada of having a defeatist attitude. So what we're seeing is he's become this messiah bastion of the West, and now he's alienating other provinces. Now then, here is the quote where I think you will agree. I know you're not an animal person, but
No.
You know enough about animals, and I think you will agree with me that this quote is wrong. I think people should elect a cat person. If you elect a dog person, you elect someone who wants to be loved. If you elect a cat person, you elect someone who wants to serve. Said no one about cats ever.
I don't know. I don't know. Let's look at this. Let's look at this because if you elect a cat lover, you are electing somebody who wants to serve their cat. and that should be at the very minimum what you should expect out of a cat person if they really want to serve. They're in it to serve their cat. And what did he do? It's their cat that he wants to serve. It is his foster cats he wants to serve. He does not want to serve the feline task force that was put into place on the Night of Strays.
Yes.
He wants to serve his own cat. His own cat can now run free because he is out to serve his cat.
Yeah.
Like, realistically.
Okay, so I'm going to power through these quotes because I think they give a notion of, we've mentioned how he didn't walk the walk. He didn't walk what he was talking. But also there are some opinions in here that I think really shake the foundations of Canada, the foundations of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms as well. And it's quite disturbing to see. And you can now understand why when we say Polvier is worse and it's terrifying, I think you'll understand why. So are you ready for some of these?
I'm ready. Let's bring on the cat hate.
There's going to be a new code on Parliament Hill. Bend the rules, you will be punished. Break the law, you will be charged. Abuse the public trust, you will go to prison. Didn't happen, did it? America, and particularly your conservative movement, is a light and inspiration to people in this country and around the world. Please note that would be the conservative Christian evangelical movement. I'm very libertarian in the sense that I believe in small government, and as a general rule, I don't believe in imposing values upon people. Sounds great, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It's a lot of right pretty speech there.
Yeah. But not specifying, I don't believe in imposing values upon people. Which people are you referring to, and which values are you referring to here?
That's
Canada,
far too complex. Far too complex for you to understand.
Canada is big enough to make a difference, but not big enough to threaten anybody. And that is a huge asset if used properly. Now, I get that, because squatter's law! But also, like, okay, that doesn't really say anything. How are you using that asset? As a religion, bilingualism is the god that failed. It has led to no fairness, produced no unity, and cost Canadian taxpayers untold millions. What the F? This one you're gonna love. This one you're gonna love. It is past time the feds scrapped the Canada Health Act.
Yeah.
That's our universal health care, dude.
That's...
Like, I don't know where you would be without universal health care. I'm fairly certain I would be dead by now.
Yeah, see, I think I would be okay without universal health care. Whether or not I would be educated, or, allowed to take time off for various medical issues, or have employment, or have a job, or be able to survive without laying in a massive heap in Miri's dungeon.
Of pain.
Of pain!
Yeah.
And actually, I think one of the things that Miri would do is actually just, like, if there was no Canada Health Code, she would actually put in the dungeon of pain, but pain would be all, like, glorious weapons, just strewed upon things. It's quite obvious that is my chamber. Eli gets the window room with the sun leaking in. But no, that's... You want to axe the Canada Health Act.
And that's nuts. But if that made you upset, this one will make you more upset. Human rights commissions, as they are evolving, are an attack on our fundamental freedoms and the basic existence of a democratic society. It is in fact totalitarianism, and I find this very scary stuff. What the F, dude? Like... Faith teaches that there is a right and a wrong beyond mere opinion or desire. Most importantly, it teaches us that freedom is not an end in itself, that how freedom is exercised matters as much as freedom itself. Faith, that is religion. That is bringing religion into the public sphere directly, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the unemployed, of which we have over 1.5 million, I don't feel particularly bad for many of these people. They don't feel bad about themselves as long as they're receiving general social assistance and unemployment insurance. That's him going into an attack on that assistance and unemployment insurance and basically making them out to be, scamming the system, which is such a lie. You've got to remember that west of Winnipeg, the ridings of the Liberals are held. The ridings the Liberals hold are dominated by people who are either recent Asian immigrants or recent migrants from Eastern Canada. People who live in ghettos and who are not integrated into Western Canadian society. Look, you can say he didn't do brownface, but this is arguably worse, like what he's saying. He got voted in saying this stuff.
Yes, he did.
Now, pay equity has everything to do with pay and nothing to do with equity. It is based on a vague notion of equal pay for work of equal value, which is not the same as equal pay for the same job.
Kind of is.
Canada is a Northern European welfare state in the worst sense of the term, and very proud of it. Carbon dioxide does not cause or contribute to smog, and the Kyoto Treaty will do nothing to reduce or prevent smog.
Da, 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 da.
Here we go. It will come as a surprise to nobody. It will come as no surprise to anybody to know that I support the traditional definition of marriage as union between one man and one woman to the exclusion of all others, as expressed in our traditional common law. Liberals may blather about protecting cultural minorities, but the fact is that undermining the traditional definition of marriage is an assault on multiculturalism and the practices in those communities. So now you're seeing he was saying all this stuff against different types of immigrants, but if those immigrants have the same religious beliefs that he does or similar, all of a sudden he's making friends with them, even though all his other stuff is going to be going against them, their families, and other relations. Make no mistake, Canada is not a bilingual country. In fact, it is less bilingual today than it ever has been. That is a lie. And then finally, this party will not take its position based on public opinion polls. We will not take a stand based on focus groups. We will not take a stand based on phone-in shows or householder surveys or any other vagaries of public opinion. There is so much wrong, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. So now we get the sexy moves. Look at that sexy, seductive
I told you to take him out of this one. He does not deserve to be in there.
We need a distraction. This is a distraction. Look at
the
sexy
put
moves.
in a cat or something.
Look at the sexy moves.
Put in a bunch
Everything
of
will be fine.
inside.
Everything will be fine. Okay, so he was a member of Richview Collegiate's team on Reach for the Top, which was a quiz show for high schoolers. He was on his this is a big one. This is Murray's conspiracy theory, all right? And mentioned on technicality, apparently Pierre Elliott Trudeau led to the conservatism and the religiousism that is Harper. And you want to know why?
Why?
He was originally on his high school's Young Liberals Club. However, he disagreed with the National Energy Program, NEP, of Pierre Trudeau's Liberal government and changed his political allegiance. So, the NEP is what caused Harper to go conservative and led us to all of this. All of this!
From sea to shining sea.
He went to the University of Toronto's Trinity College and dropped out to go to Alberta. He started working in the mailroom at Imperial Oil and then moved to work on the company's computer systems. There, they supported him in going to the University of Calgary to get a bachelor's and master's on economics. In 1985, he was executive assistant to Progressive Conservative Member of Parliament Jim Hawkes, and he became disillusioned with the party and the government of Brian Mulroney, citing the administration's economic policy, and left the party in 85. Then we have University of Calgary's economist Bob Mansell to Preston Manning, which was the founder of the right-wing populist Reform Party of Canada. So Harper comes in and he's now the Reform Party's chief policy advisor. He's drafted into the party's 1988 election platform, which is called the Blue Book. He influenced his political mentor, Tom Flanagan. He is credited with creating the Reform Party's slogan, "The West Wants In." He became Deborah Gray, which was the first Reform Party's MP executive assistant, chief advisor, and speechwriter. He did the speech at the Reform Party's 91 National Convention and wanted them to expand beyond the region. At the Charlotte Accords, he opposed the accord for ideological reasons, while Preston Manning was initially open to more compromise. This started the split between him and Manning. Harper resigned as chief policy officer in 92. He then became an MP from 93 to 97 and did not seek re-election. He was with the National Citizens Coalition. So during this time, the National Citizens Coalition ran a $50,000 print and television campaign against Jim Hawkes, but did not support Harper directly. He played a prominent role in drafting the Reform Party strategy for the 95 Quebec referendum, opposed both same-sex marriage and mandates for benefits for same-sex couples, but argued that political parties should refrain from taking political official positions on these and other issues of conscience. Supported the creation of the Canadian Firearms Registry at the second reading and only rejected it at the third. There's more, but he starts really criticizing Manning now. So we continue. Harper and Tom Flanagan co-author an opinion piece called "Our Benign Dictatorship Calls for a Coalition Between Conservative Factions." Says that the Liberal Party only retained power through a dysfunctional political system and divided the opposition. There's Conrad Black had a purchase of the Southern newspaper chain, the Southam newspaper chain, and they believed that Conrad Black's stewardship would provide for a pluralistic editorial view to counter the monolithically liberal and feminist approaches to the previous management. This should show you how evangelical he was even before he became leader. It was all there. Constitutional issue commentary happened. He was joining and later leading the National Citizens Coalition, which was a conservative lobbyist group, which led to an unsuccessful battle against federal election laws, which would restrict third-party advertising. He campaigned against the Canadian Wheat Board as well. He delivered a controversial speech on Canadian identity to the Council for National Policy, which was a conservative American think tank. This is where we're saying that Harper was a robot created by a conservatives think tank. This is the moment. We're not making this stuff up. It's all there. That's where he had his quote about Canada being a Northern European welfare state. It goes on and on. He talks about how the NDP is kind of proof that the devil lives and interferes in the affairs of men. Like, what the F is that? Mike Harris aides now encourage him to go for federal progressive Conservative Party leadership, but he decided against it because about burning bridges with those reformers whom I worked for many years, and that prevented an alliance of the right-wing parties taking shape. So after the death of Pierre Elliott Trudeau in 2000, he wrote that Trudeau embraced the fashionable cause of his time with variable enthusiasm and differing results, but took a pass on issues that truly defined his century. Just the person who created the Canadian...
Yeah, he clearly didn't do anything that would have remotely...
He wanted to join with other Western conservatives and co-authored the Alberta Agenda, which talked about the provincial government in Alberta building a firewall to stop the federal government from redistributing its wealth to less affluent regions. Keep in mind, they were accepting those redistributions before, when they weren't as affluent. He argued, like, just constant barrage on Canada and what it is, and constantly talking about, Alberta being stronger and more autonomous. So he finally, in 2002, becomes leader of the Canadian Alliance. And his platform to win, he argued that French language is not imperialed in Quebec, and opposed special status for the province in the Canadian Constitution. Endorsed greater provincial autonomy on Medicare. He would not cooperate with progressive conservatives as long as they were led by Joe Clark. That should be a signal to you about Joe Clark's leanings, by the way. He argued for parental rights to use corporal punishment against their children, and supported raising the age of sexual consent. The Day campaign accused Harper of attacking ethnic and religious minorities, which he was. He became an MP in the House of Commons. He said that that's where he said his piece about the Atlantic provinces. He said that he refused to apologize because much of Canada was trapped by the same can't-do attitude. 2003, he and Stockwell Day co-wrote a letter to the Wall Street Journal in which they condemned the Canadian government's unwillingness to participate in the invasion of Iraq. 2003 was when he negotiated the merger of the Progressive Conservatives and the Reform Party to make the Conservative Party of Canada. 2003 is when we got the Conservative Party of Canada, and that is when the Reform Party effectively took over, because you saw a bunch of progressive conservatives see the writing on the wall and jump. And then you had, people who crossed the floor, very famously, etc., etc. 95% of the alliance members voted in favor. 90% of the 2,486 PC delegation voted in favor. This was about winning. That's what this choice was. If we unite the right, we win. So they were founded at the end of 2003. So he became the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and the leader of the opposition. Resigned as official leader of the opposition, and he was elected as the first leader of the Conservative Party with a first ballot majority against Belinda Stronach and Tony Clement. His victory included a strong showing of Western Canada, by the way. Now, we get into, there was a co-letter that he did with the NDP and the Bloc calling for the Governor General to allow them to lead the government against the Liberal government at the time. This was a misstep of Jack Layton. Like I said, I was in a staunchly NDP household at the time. My mother knew everything about what Stephen Harper had said up to this point. It's frightening stuff. It is frightening stuff what he said and was saying. So to have Jack Layton align himself with that was a big slap in the face to my household at the time. And I believe it was felt by a lot of NDP supporters. So it was that's why I say it was his misstep. Now, he did walk away from it. So I will give Jack Layton credit there. And he did have quite a good recovery from that misstep. It's just that's why I think there was some animosity towards Jack Layton, was because of, like, you're willing to align yourself with this person who is going against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, going against the foundations of Canada, basically.
Yep.
Harper and the other two opposition leaders denied trying to form a coalition government. Layton did walk out on talks with them, accusing of trying to replace Paul Martin with Harper as prime minister. And the Bloc and Conservatives denied Layton's accusations. So we don't know what went on specifically because we weren't in the room, but I'm pretty sure we can probably find out. He did, at the leadership convention, drop his opposition to abortion. By the way, and he did make a concerted drive against same-sex marriage. Now then, 2006, he does become prime minister. He had a minority government 2 times and then a majority. He lost and we spoke about everything that went on there. He lost the 2015 election and officially stepped down as party leader in 2015 and resigned his seat in 2016. He was basically a backbencher present for votes during that period. 2013, he published a book, The Great Game, The Forgotten Leaves and the Rise of Professional Hockey. He has consistently criticized Justintrudeau and supported Donald Trump from 2016 on, which should say a lot about him as a person. In 2018, in a statement, he knew about the sexual assaults allegations against then Conservative MP Rick Dykstra during the 2015 election, but could not justify removing him as a candidate because the investigation was closed by police a year before the election. How convenient. On 2018, he attended the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews Gala at Mar-a-Lago, where he stated he expressed his support for U.S. President Donald Trump's speech on Jerusalem and expressed support for Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran deal by lending his signature to an ad. 2018, he also appeared on a show hosted by Ben Shapiro, where he made comments on issues such as populism, immigration, and nationalism. The National Post noted that those comments echoed the argument made in his recently released book, Right Here, Right Now, Politics and Leadership in the Age of Destruction, which urges conservatives to listen to populist grievances rather than focus on other priorities like tax cuts for the wealthy. 2019, he appeared on a PragerU video explaining why Donald Trump was elected to the presidency in 2016. He also appeared on another PragerU video, again explaining his reasons to support Israel amid the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. 2021, during a virtual gathering hosted by the Conference of Defense Associations Institute, Harper claimed that the world has entered into a second Cold War between the United States and China, and that middle powers such as Canada are also part of the rivalry. He also appeared on a podcast, American Optimist, which is hosted by Joe Lonsdale. And in the interview, he criticized Justintrudeau's government's large-scale deficit spending during COVID-19, calling it overkill. And he also criticized woke culture. I'm sorry, people were dying. Gee, so sorry they were dying during a global pandemic.
But they were dying during a global pandemic, and we have to.
2022, he endorsed his former cabinet minister Pierre Poilievre for leadership of the Conservative Party. Poilievre is so much more right-wing than Harper is. It is frightening. It is.
It makes Harper look centrist.
Yeah, it is terrifying. And the reason why I'm going through so much detail in Harper's, and I'm not even going into full detail of his involvement with the Reformist Party, his evangelical beliefs, etc., is to show we're not lying when we say this is where he's aligned. This is where he's aligned. He's told us so. Everything he's done, everything he said, he's told us so. And Poilievre, you can go and look at what he said. He's told us so. It's there. We're not lying. We're not making things up. 2023, during a conservative conference in Ottawa, he again criticized Justintrudeau for his government's handling of Chinese interference in the 2019 and 2021 Canadian federal elections, and also criticized the NDP, calling them a branch plant of the Liberal Party, and argued that the party got nothing out of its confidence and supply agreement with the Liberal Party. So again, we're seeing those divisionist tactics that he used before. He's using them again. Same year, he endorsed Albertan Premier Danielle Smith for their provincial election. He is involved with Global Consulting Firm, and he is the elected leader of the International Democrat Union. So, the reason why we spent so long on him is to show that the fears.
He's Mary's favorite person, who she loves so much.
The fears about him are not unfounded. He's said this stuff. Polivier goes even harder right than he does. It's frightening. And this is again what I mean. If we're looking at leaders who can't even have the bare minimum of maintaining the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, they shouldn't even be here. Like, it's really terrifying. And you'll see when we get into Justintrudeau why I basically say he's that marker for what the bare minimum qualifications you want in a leader. Yes, he's problematic. It's not, but I think we've noted all of them are problematic, except for Lester B. Pearson for like some reason. Except for him, they all have problems. But this is to show that, like, we, with this kind of a polarizing right that is against stuff in our charter, it's becoming harder and harder to vote according to who you want versus voting to not have something horrible happen. You know what I'm saying?
I think there is a quote here that is very, very prevalent. It's not about Stephen Harper, but it could be construed as something that is about the people who got him into power. Who rejects the British crown? Who keeps metric system down? We do. We do. Who keeps Atlantis off the maps? Who keeps the Martians under wraps? We do. We do. Who holds back the electric car? Who made Steve Gutenberg a star? We do. We do. Who reads Cape Fish off their site? Who rigs every Oscar night? We do. We do.
That was said with so much gravitas. I have to applaud you for that.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. Is there anything you like? Again, also, I think one thing that I find people don't talk about Stephen Harper enough is that closing of the labs. That was insane. That closing of the labs. Is there anything you'd like to say on Harper before we move on?
To give him credit, because I know people will attack us if we don't say this. He was the person to apologize for the 2008 residential school system, or in 2008 for residential schools. He did do that, and congratulations to him for doing that. It was really Justintrudeau that put things into place that really gave that apology meaning. However, Harper is the one to do it, and there was like commonality there with previous governments that was a crime. That's about all the obviousness I can say. Going into Justintrudeau, though, to give Harper all the credit in the world, the attack ads he used in 2015, the Justintrudeau, he's just not ready. Those attack ads were beautifully done. Objectively beautifully done. Even if you don't agree with them, they were beautifully done. Even if you agree with Justintrudeau's response to them, they were beautifully done. The Harper Hello Fellow Kids ads, where he was the one coveting Netflix and all the people to appear palatable to a younger generation. Though those maybe weren't done so well. You can see how he got into power, and you can see his qualifications that got him into power. For Harper to have worked, you would have need to have a party that could limit the extremist influences. And I think that's fair to say for right and left as well. You need things in there, if you're going to be a truly centrist party, that limits extreme views. Part of the reason why the Justintrudeau party got in is in reaction to those extremist views with views of their own that one could argue would put Canada back on a proverbial centrist track. But it's still, those still are very, very extremist things to be able to get behind, as great as some of them are.
What I will say is, thankfully he had two minority governments. This is a big advantage of the Canadian political system, is having a minority government means that the oppositions have more they have more power. They have more power to stop things. They have more power to ask questions. They have more power to do those checks and balances that are missing when you have a majority. So it is advantageous.
Sure would be great.
It is advantageous to have it when you have somebody with incredibly extreme views who can just come in and sweep away so much, which is the other terror reason behind Pelvier. I'll note that, Pelvier.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Trapdoor Crabsworth for deathpixie. If you liked our content, please like this video and subscribe. And if you want to see more, just check out our links in the description. Do it or Miri will kill you.